Good morning, good afternoon, colleagues. My name is Alison Clausen, and I'm a Program Specialist with the Intergovernamental Oceanographic Commission of UNESCO. Over the last 3 years, IOC has been leading preparation of the UN Decade of Ocean Science for Sustainable Development, or more simply, the Ocean Decade, and I'm very pleased to have been asked to prepare this overview of the status of the preparation process and let you know about some key next steps as we gear up to the launch of the decade in January 2021. The decade preparation process has been very participatory. Between May 2019 and June 2020, a series of global and regional planning meetings engaged nearly 2,000 stakeholders in discussions on what the decade should look like. These meetings have been characterized by the diversity of participation, including the scientific community, of course, but also governments, UN bodies, NGOs, business and industry, donors, and civil society. These meetings generated important inputs to the development of the Decade Implementation Plan. Now, this plan provides the framework for how the decade will be rolled out. Its starting point is the vision of the decade, that is, the science we need for the ocean we want, and it also describes the 7 desired decade outcomes. The plan contains a series of Ocean Decade challenges, and these challenges reflect the most immediate and urgent needs for the decade, and they aim to convene stakeholders around common actions and priorities. The actual initiatives that will be carried out to meet the challenges are referred to as decade actions. Decade actions can take different forms, and they'll be designed, proposed, resourced, and implemented by a diverse range of stakeholder groups. The decade aims to facilitate new and innovative partnerships, especially between generators of ocean science and users of ocean science, to co-develop and co-deliver many of these actions so they're targeted to the most pressing needs of society to achieve sustainable development. There will be a process to endorse decade actions so they can have formal recognition as part of the decade. The Decade Coordination Unit, which will be a new unit which will sit within the IOC Secretariat, will launch calls for decade actions. Stakeholders can propose ideas for programs or projects in response to these calls, and these proposed actions will be considered for endorsement against a set of criteria that are contained in the implementation plan. These criteria embody the guiding principles of the decade, such as the need for ocean science to be solutions-focused, the principle of inclusivity across generations, genders, and geographies, the fundamental importance of capacity development and data management throughout the decade, and the role for Indigenous and local knowledge holders. The first call for actions for multi-country programs is expected to be launched in mid-October this year, and we'll be able to provide more information in coming weeks on the process and timelines for that call. In addition to implementing decade actions, there are other ways that stakeholders can get involved. Different voluntary engagement structures will be formed, including national decade committees, and for which Brazil is obviously a pioneer, which is fantastic to see, as well as regional or thematic stakeholder groups. There will be a virtual in-person global stakeholder forum created in early 2021, and the Decade Coordination Unit will use this forum to convene communities of practice around the Ocean Decade challenges and foster connections between different stakeholder groups. This forum will also allow groups such as the National Decade Committees to exchange and share information with other stakeholders around the world. And there will be an international and regional conference series to bring together partners to discuss and review progress and identify future priorities for the decade. The implementation plan obviously contains more detailed information on all these processes and structures. Version 2.0 of the implementation plan has just been finalized and sent for presentation to the United Nations General Assembly for its consideration. And you can find that plan on the Decade website, which is oceandecade.org. There is also a summary version of the plan on the website. Now, in terms of next steps, I mentioned the call for actions that will be launched in October. There's also the formal consideration of the implementation plan by the United Nations General Assembly, which will take place from September through to November this year. In September, we will start the first of a series of webinars called the Virtual Decade Series to address a range of scientific and cross-cutting themes of the decade. In the first few months of 2021, we'll coordinate the establishment of different coordination structures for the decade. This will include regional or programmatic coordination structures that will be hosted by partners and that we hope will be spread in numerous locations around the world. Throughout the first half of 2021, there'll be a number of high-level events, including an international conference in Berlin hosted by the German government and the UN Ocean Conference at a date yet to be confirmed in Lisbon. Details of all these events are or will be on the Decade website, and we hope that you'll be able to be active participants in many of them. As a final word, we're really thrilled to see so much activity and engagement in Brazil, and we recognise the role that you are playing in setting an example for other countries and regions. We would like to send you our strong encouragement and our sincere thanks for this engagement. On behalf of the Decade team at the IOC Secretariat, we look forward to hearing the results of the workshops and continuing to work with you in coming months and years. Many thanks to you all, and have a very productive workshop.